Most of us consider the UFC the land of the lawless. Many would argue that the ring should be no holds barred. But as it turns out, even the UFC has its limits. From Gaethje climbing the octagon cage after defeating Michael Johnson, to Jake Paul getting wasted at a UFC event and yelling at officials. Let's take a dive into these limits by looking at all the banned celebrations in the UFC. We'll start off by talking about the UFC banning flag celebrations. We're not all patriotic, but most of us like to represent our nation a little, right? It forms such a crucial part of who we are. How can we not? There's a reason why we have celebrations on Independence Days. Even the least patriotic of us want to make some noise and go blow up some fireworks. Admittedly, some people take it too far when they make their homeland their whole personality. We can see why that might be a tad bit annoying, but hey, does that justify completely banning the use of flags? What do you think? Well, I can tell you what the UFC President Dana White thinks. Dana thinks the fighting ring is no place for political statements, and when entering the ring, fighters need to leave their flags right at home, above their fireplace where they belong. No, really. When he was asked about his decision to ban flags, he gave the kind of response you'd expect from him. Any guesses? He's a straight-up guy, no beating around the bush. He literally said he just doesn't want to play that game, and that we already know why he did what he did. Jeez, some clarity would have been nice.
They wasn't gonna let me walk with the Hawaiian flag.
Why?
And then even like even with the
In Vegas?
when I first started doing it.
But I guess we wouldn't raise our expectations with that man given recent events. But that's a conversation for another time. For now, let me give you the answer that Dana White didn't. Well, experts suggest that the UFC just doesn't want to get all political. The ring is a place where we see fighters channeling all their emotions, their pent-up frustrations, aggression, all that angst. It's not like they can leave their issues at home when they enter the ring. No, they actually carry it with them. But sometimes these sentiments are a tad bit stronger in a few fighters than in others. They literally make the personal political, like the time Edmund Shabazian carried out the flag for the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, a literal illegal regime that Azerbaijan has been trying to defeat, or the time Bilal Muhammad moved his activism to the ring, along with the Palestinian flag.
Ramadan Kareem to my brothers and sisters out there celebrating. This was my hump I had to get over, you know? He knocked me out. He beat me. I had to think about that my whole camp.
Or perhaps the Russian fighters that started this trend by flashing the Russian flag, even as their country continued to invade Ukraine. Yikes.
Georgia, Russia occupied, and they did same whatever they doing against Ukraine now. And I want to say loud, hopefully we can stop this war. This is crazy. This is insane.
Can you tell why the UFC is probably in no mood to become the meeting point of international conflict? Things take quite an ugly turn when people's patriotism gets involved. Come on, guys. Literal wars have been started for this. So while the banning of flags may seem a tad unfair, in this context, the UFC can justify it. But then again, there are some banned celebrations that they simply can't justify. Like, what possible reason did the UFC ban cage climbing celebrations for? Remember the iconic match in July 2017 when Gaethje defeated Michael Johnson and decided to mark his victory by climbing atop the ring? Come on, guys, it was an iconic win. How can you forget? Okay, if you've forgotten, that's okay. It's part of my job description to jog your memory a bit. This match was one of the most exciting of 2017, and to mark the end of such an exciting match, Gaethje decided to reward his fans with a bit more excitement. The poor man just wanted to do a backflip from the top of the cage, but hey, accidents happen. People slip up, quite literally, and so did he. Except his little slip-up may have potentially come at a cost much higher than any of us would expect. All Octagon fighters were then banned from climbing the cage to celebrate their win. Ah, that must have sucked. Even the fighter himself thought it was ridiculous.
No, I tried to. I'm not a quitter. I proved it. Hey, it was really slippery up there. When I got up there, it was slipperier than any other cage I've jumped off, or any other cage I've jumped off of. I don't know.
He pointed out that they literally beat each other to a pulp in the ring. How is climbing a cage such a threat then? Well, the UFC doesn't always make sense when it comes to their own rules. It makes no sense to disallow fighters from betting on matches. And yes, this isn't exactly a celebration, but is it not? The UFC is quite literally taking away its fighters' rights to celebrate the wins of other players. Watching a game gets so much more exciting when something is at stake. And what's a better way to celebrate than in dollars? Come on, We would all love it if we could make a little extra cash each time our favorite player won. But recently, the UFC decided to take away the fun from it all by changing the UFC athlete conduct policy. Now players are no longer allowed to bet on one another. And while this rule makes no sense to me personally, it turns out lots of other sports have the same rule. Did someone say buzzkill? Just kidding. The NFL actually suspended Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley for betting on games. Before this, baseball legend Pete Rose was excommunicated for this. The UFC are following the same pattern, and hey, they probably have some logic behind it. We hope. But then again, some of these bans do make sense. It's perfectly justified to ban celebrations by using substances. Listen, there's no way we can attack the UFC for this ban. Imagine a room full of men with pent-up aggression, adrenaline rushing through their veins, and now add alcohol to the equation. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. God knows what would happen if these people lose the ability to control themselves. And nothing takes away a person's self-control as much as alcohol. I'm not one to moral police anyone, but it's biologically proven. We can't deny what's right there. Perhaps that's why the UFC has a strict no-drug policy. We can't have fighters celebrating their win with a big swig in the locker room. And again, of course, drugs aren't only banned as a means of celebration, they're banned altogether. And while it makes no sense to prohibit players from showing up to the ring wasted out of their minds, as it turns out, they can't do this even after. Well, they can do what they want at home, but the ring has certain rules. And if you're entering the ring, you need to follow them. And we've seen examples of this. Remember Jake Paul? He's the biggest example of what not to do.
You said I wouldn't do this, and I did it, and with flying colors. But, you know, he's in hiding. You know, he's trying to do everything he can to stop my run, to sabotage my fights. He hates me. He hates me.
The man literally got wasted and shouted obscene things to UFC officials and fans. Guess where that landed him? That's right, he literally got banned from UFC events.
If you two think that you can do it better than we do, we're doing this whole thing wrong. You could treat the fighters better than we do. Knock yourself out. Go start your own business. It's easy to do. Go get the Warlock on it.
Of course, he tried to sneak in anyway. But then again, let's just drop this subject because this man is in no way the model UFC fighter to begin with. Not the best when it comes to following rules. And if one thing this video has clarified, it's that the UFC has rules that the players must adhere to. That being said, it's a wrap for today. See you next time.